Hey, this is David Owen.
And this is Marian Cowagowan.
And this is You Show Me Yours, a podcast where a married couple talks about the movies and television that they loved before the first date. And this time, I was made to watch All the President's Men.
Yes, it is part 2 in our occasional series of movies about journalists doing good and saving the world, or trying to, one story at a time. And this is I would say this is the original, at least for my generation. It's the one that made a whole lot of people want to be journalists. And then in about 2001, they all said, wait, what? This isn't what I thought it was going to be, but that's for another time. So this is the story of Woodward and Bernstein, the two Washington Post reporters who broke Watergate. And this is the movie version of their book, well, part of their book, which we'll talk about in a minute, which details their investigation of the Watergate scandal in the Nixon White House. And the scandal, or that investigation, was 1972 to 1974. Well, 74 was when Nixon resigned, and the book came out shortly, I don't know, during that time. And then the movie came out in 1976. So for all this, we're talking a while ago. This is all before either of us was born. So, it's really a long time ago, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, but for many, many reasons, probably every journalism major who is our age, certainly and older, probably and younger, owes at least some of their inspiration for their career choice to this movie. Inspiration or blame, I don't know. So I've seen this several times. I've read the book at least once. I've read a couple of books about it. I'm just sort of a sucker for this whole mythos because it really is a good example, I think, of how journalists work on a story, how they look at something that happened and there are these lingering questions like, that's weird. Or why did that happen that way? Or I bet there's more to this than I think. So let me spend some time investigating this. And then you put this piece together and that piece together. And then it becomes something else. And you follow the trail and you pull the thread. And then you get to the big story. The big story rarely drops on you all at once. And you've got to put in the work. And it's nice to see the inner workings of a newsroom too, which we talked a little bit about in the episode we did on the paper. It's nice to see kind of the negotiations as to how one story becomes another and the inside politics. But all that is me. So Dave, you had never seen this before and you are not steeped in journalism lore as I was. What did you know about this before? Give me your gut reaction.
What did I know about the movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I had heard of it. I know it was on the lists. Pretty sure this is one of the AMC.
Oh, I'm sure.
Or AFI 100.
Yeah.
I just always remember that AFI 100 list came out when I was working at a video store.
Yeah.
And I had to do the display where we put all the ones we had. We had about like 55 of them or something. I had to put them all on the shelf in order. Yeah, I mean, that's the sort of thing. I had absorbed it through cultural osmosis, but yeah, I'd never seen it. It was one of the things where I always thought like, man, I should watch that. Even dating back to that time in the video store in the late 90s. Yeah. So no, that was, I mean, and then of course the actual Watergate. Yeah. Like I know what it's changed. It used to be Cliff's Notes. Was it now?
Spark Notes?
Yeah. Whatever.
I don't know.
Yeah. I kind of knew that, Woodward, Bernstein, Deep Throat, G. Gordon Liddy. Like I knew the names, you hear them over the years and Nixon resigns, all that stuff. But yeah. I mean, I knew the 10,000 feet.
You knew like the first paragraph of the Wikipedia entry.
Yeah, pretty
Which
much.
Honestly is kind of what I know too, even having read this several times and watched it several times and all this other stuff. It reminds me a little bit of whenever I read anything that has to do with British dynasties and this king and that king and this duke and this dude, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I have to take notes. I need a reference chart as I'm reading to keep track of all this. Like I need that with this movie because there's so many names that have lower level positions that I just forget who is who. And even having watched this a couple times, I have to forget. And that's one thing that watching this now, because it's been a couple years since I saw this. Watching this now, I think this was very much made for an audience who had been through Watergate and was somewhat familiar with the details and the people. And I wonder how it would have been different if they had said, no, we're making this for people 40 plus years from now who don't know any of this.
Yeah.
I think there might have been a little more, you see the technique in movies today, particularly kind of biopics or docudramas, where there's a lot of important characters who, like, when they come in, there's like a freeze frame and there's a caption that goes up, like H.R. Haldeman, blah 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 blah.
Yeah, like the laziest type of filmmaking, but also still effective at giving you a huge information dump.
It does the job. I was thinking about other movies that I've seen where it was a movie made about contemporary events. Sorry, I was going to say history, but that's not it. And I think The Big Short, not The Big Short, Too Big to Fail. That's it. Same crisis, different angle. I think they did that, and that also was a subject matter that I barely understand. I've watched that movie like 4 times, and I still only just understand what was going on. But I remember the people, and I understand that really well because they did make good use of that. So it's interesting to think about if they were making this again for an audience that hadn't lived through it, how would it be different? And then you think about, as you do with any movie set in what's now the past, how would this happen today? Like, how are journalists getting tips from sources now? Yeah. They can't look them up in the phone book.
Yeah. Do
you look them up and hope they're on Twitter? Do you wait for them to, what's that anonymous Vox something? You can email people anonymously and send them files anonymously.
You looked into this? What's going on? Do you need to tell me something?
Yeah, I'm going to send them your tax records from 2002 and let know. Yeah. I don't know. I just know there's far different ways of doing shoe leather journalism now than there were 50 years ago.
Oh yeah. So. I mean, there's a whole discussion to have about that. Just the methods that are presented, how that would differ from today, because there's so much more information. Like you look at these guys looking stuff up in the phone book and all these things, and you think like, oh, how quaint.
Yes.
But also, it may have actually been easier because, this guy isn't actually online as, Lord Acid 69.
Right.
His entire online presence is behind some pseudonym. Although with the right information, it is almost impossible to hide your identity online. Like, you constantly see anonymous people named and shamed on social media apps and stuff.
Yeah. But you use the same username one too many times and
right. Or even the same. I mean, the thing that they get you most often with is a picture. Yeah. The picture that you put for the avatar on your anonymous thing, you also used that on this message board where you happen to put your, real state you were from, and then they use that to,
yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of fun old technology in this movie, typewriters and rotary phones. And the phone, getting the phone book, like they literally have a shelf of just like a bunch of phone books, and like someone's like, oh, this guy's in Kansas. Oh, then you just get the Kansas phone book.
And I remember that at the library, you'd have to go and be like, oh, I need a phone book for this. And when I was growing up, my mom had the phone book for St. Louis, Missouri, because that's where my grandmother lived. So if my grandmother was like, I need someone to come fix the toilet, my mom would be like, let me look up a plumber for you. Okay, call this guy, whatever. And I don't think Will's ever seen a phone book in his life.
We've had phone books in the house since he's been alive, but I don't know that he's
recently.
Yeah, I don't know that he's really,
And I don't have a phone book for my hometown, just so you know.
Oh,
I think I did at one point, and then I was like, okay, no, this is a waste.
Right. Yeah. This is the sort of historical memorabilia of my life that really isn't as important as I thought.
Well, and my parents can call their own plumbers, so they're fine.
Yeah.
But this is an interesting look at old technology and what probably was, because it's the Post, it's a big paper, was fairly state of the art at the time. But I get a kick out. I get a kick out of the the newsroom stuff. Like, nobody's got computers, and they've got to write, I guess, their stories one page at a time.
Yeah.
And then put it in the basket for the desk to mark up. And then probably down in the composing room, it's literally like machines and wax or, hot type and all this stuff. And it's just the journalism nerd in me is like make more. I want to see more of it.
Yeah, more classic.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the background noise is just a cacophony of typewriters.
Yeah. Well, and apparently the filmmakers were very diligent about getting all those details right. The production designers, I think, sat in the post newsroom for months, just like taking notes and seeing how things were. And I think I remember that they brought in authentic newsroom trash to I guess fill the trash cans there. I don't know. I need to look this up and figure out what the rest of that is. But
yeah,
there was
or just
something about
you would, if you were going to have a bunch of wadded up paper, it would be that paper that they type on that's got the red streaks on it, and maybe that's it. Yeah. Oh, it wouldn't just be a bunch of notebook paper wadded up.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe
it's not going to be it's like blank paper, and then you can totally tell when you zoom in. But this is actual stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. So it's not nostalgia for me because I wasn't there for this, but
right. Yeah.
What's the term for that? Nostalgia for something that you never experienced?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it is that sort of it's that kind of thing where you and I both got into that realm because I was schooled in the late 90s for graphic design, computer, what was then called computer aided graphic design, meaning laying out and photo manipulation and stuff all done digitally.
Quark Express 1.0 probably.
Yeah, PageMaker, all this kind of stuff. And there was a certain almost like reverence for that generation that had just ended of equipment, like thinking, had I gone into that business of even like I was big into Photoshop, photo manipulation and photo editing and stuff, and knowing that like people used to be there with X-Acto knives cutting things out and, adding us the right chemical to tint it this way. And just like all of that kind of stuff, that it's almost like there's I think I said reverence, there's like, oh man, remember the old days when there wasn't like two pushes of a button and the filter menu?
Yeah, well, and it's I know just enough about the old way of doing things that I'm glad to have the modern ways. I took a copy editing class in, it would have been spring of 1997, I think, and everybody in my program had to do it. And copy editing on a newspaper is about editing for grammar and style and all that stuff, but also writing headlines. And every place now you have your layout program or your editing program or whatever will tell you, okay, you have this much space to put a headline in, and it'll tell you what fits and what doesn't. Mm-hmm. But, in the olden days, you had to count it yourself, and you had to know like a lowercase r is 1 point and an uppercase W is 5 points or, whatever. Oh, yeah. And you had to, and our teacher made us do this. And all of us, even then, were like, we're not going to have to do this in real life. Our newsrooms are going to have computers. And my professor was like, no, you need to know it anyway. I have never, ever had to do that in real life. Yeah. Thank God, because it was crazy.
Yeah. But, and I mean, and that's just the generation that we come from. You know, that's the
we're on the
late Gen X, early millennials where there were still places when I entered high school that were still doing the more traditional stuff. And by the time I got out of high school and went into this secondary school for this, it was almost all digital at that point. Yeah. Like I'm sure if I had gone to a traditional 4-year college and did a graphic design program, they were probably still teaching elements of that traditional style of doing things, but it was just like I'm looking for a word here. It wasn't antiquated yet, mm-hmm. but it was right at the edge of it. And so, you had that bunch of old timers who were just like, oh, these fancy computers, I don't need them.
Right.
What is it? What can you do on that fancy computer? I can't do with 18 hours and an X-Acto knife.
You really need to learn it this way because I said so.
Yeah.
It was good enough for whoever, it's good enough for you.
Yeah. Oh, and even within the digital program that I went to, there was this idea that even if you had a filter that could do something in Photoshop or Illustrator or whatever, you still needed to understand how to do it without the filter.
Yeah.
Because someday the filter might not be there.
Well, I don't know. I think it's similar to I don't like to, if I have to go somewhere and I don't know how to get there, I don't like to just blindly follow the GPS, because then I'm never going to learn actually how to get there. I'm always going to need the GPS. But if I have to print out directions or use a map to figure it out, then eventually I will learn it and I won't need it. So it's similar to that.
Sure.
But 18 hours in an X-Acto knife, that's a little bit much. Like, and I having suffered through counting a headline, in one class 20 plus years ago, I have no desire to do it again. So sometimes technology is for the better. I don't want to go back to typing things on a typewriter.
Yeah. So
as these guys did. So anyway, back to the actual movie.
If you don't know what we're talking about
right.
with all the with the story, like, watch this movie. Yeah. Read up on it. It's an important piece of American history that you should have been taught, but it is effectively the journalism performing its function within our democracy and holding to account the people in power. Yeah. In a way that is, it is democracy working as designed. Yeah. There's no better way to say it.
The fourth estate performing its role. Well, and this is why, and we're not going to try to recap the plot because there's so much and we would not do it justice. So
Right. And then, just
Google it. It'll tell you better than we can. But this, not this movie, but this book, this whole enterprise is why, for example, if you listen to our episode on the paper, there's the joke about every time the business reporter is talking about a scandal, he says, "Oh, it's Watergate out there." And it's not Watergate. It's not Watergate. This is why. And there was a trend for a time of every time there was a political scandal in DC, it would be something gate.
Yeah.
There's what were some of them? I can't even remember. Whitewater Gate.
Yeah. And there were several of them.
I feel like there was, and it's always kind of a joke. Nobody actually calls it that, but it's just the trend for a while. Like, it might now have been long enough that we don't refer to Watergate as
there's still it still happens. I'm not going to bring up the most recent one, but it still happens.
Yeah.
And again, because and a lot of the people that are adding gate onto the end of stuff won't even really know why they're doing it. They just know, oh yeah, political scandals just have gate on the end of them.
Yeah.
It just becomes a suffix that just means political scandal.
Well, and I think when I realized that it was called Watergate because it originally started with a break-in at the Watergate Hotel, I was like, whoa,
what?
Oh my gosh, so we could be calling it Hilton now if it had been a different thing. Like, whoa, it's just
Radisson.
Oh my God, it's the Microtel. It's the Motel 6 scandal,
Right.
Yeah, no. But yeah, I will say with this though, this is a rather painstaking approach to the development of how this story was put together. Probably a lot of details were left out. I can't remember the book versus the movie. But
and there are time jumps. There's like a couple 2-week or more time jumps in it too, where you don't see what they were doing in
the whole thing goes from June 72 to it closes on Nixon's inauguration. So that's January 73. Mm-hmm. But Nixon resigned in August of 74. And then at the end, they have some datelines from 75. So, there was a whole lot more to this. And the movie just sort of stops abruptly, like, and it reminded me of, I wrote in my notes, Underpants Gnomes, write a movie. There's a South Park episode, and I've never seen the whole thing, but I know this part. The gnomes are like, we have a plot. Step 1, steal everyone's underpants. Step 2, I don't know. Step 3, profit. Like, they just haven't figured it out. And this is sort of like Underpants Gnomes are like, step 1, investigate. Step 2, I don't know. Step 3, president resigns. Done. Like, they just, they wrote and wrote and wrote, and they were like, oh my God, this movie's too long. We just have to stop it now. Everybody knows. Everybody was there. It's fine.
Yeah.
And I think there is a second book that Woodward and Bernstein did about the end of the Nixon presidency, and maybe they thought, well, we'll make a movie of that and that'll finish it. But I don't know.
Yeah. Well, but I also think the movie ends at a logical place for it to end.
Kind of.
Because it ends. I mean, it ends with those characters, right? Like,
sure.
It ends with them, clanging away on their typewriters, doing their work. It's just they're back at the grind.
It is, it is a testimony.
They both went on to continue doing other stories that weren't as high profile.
Yes, it was a testimony to, shoe leather and making a whole lot of phone calls and checking out all the dead ends and what is it, triple, quadruple confirming so that you know that you're right. And, even when that White House says you're wrong, you're like, nope, I know I'm right.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of that, it's funny how so much of this stuff seems absolutely today, with the idea
Yes.
that the first thing the White House does in response is to say, well, if you look at the editor of the Post, you'll see that his political persuasion is opposite to the president, and therefore this is a hit piece.
Yeah. Well, the thing with that is Ben Bradley, who is played by Jason Robards here, and I want to say he got an Oscar nomination for this. I'm not sure. He actually had been very good friends with John F. Kennedy, like super good friends, as in vacationed with them, I think, and to the point where his sister-in-law had an affair with Kennedy. And here's where I've read way too much about this, because why does an average person know this? But anyway, so it wasn't just like, oh, well, he, drives a Prius, so, it was, no, really, he's friendly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But the thing is, when you actually see he is the one who is the hardest on the story.
Yeah.
They want to run with it way too early. They want to make it, make all the higher level accusations much earlier than they can. And he's always the one who says, you don't have it. You don't have it yet. And he's always the one who holds them to account. And it's that kind of thing where the sort of person that would say this person is only accusing us of wrongdoing because they're out to get us is the sort of person that doesn't understand the true level to which actual journalists go to make sure that something is accurate. And I don't think most people understand that in a good, deep way.
Yeah.
They don't understand how a reporter, especially an investigative reporter, doesn't just sit down to write a story. I mean, obviously some do, and those are the bad ones. Those are the ones that give bad reputations. But when you have something at a publication of record, if you will, that comes out like that, they have all sorts of liability concerns and defamation concerns. And
any story like that has been read by 6 different levels of editors and the publisher, who never reads anything except for the important stuff, and a team of lawyers, and they've given everybody an opportunity to comment. And to me, the most telling thing about it is if you get into, and I don't want to get too deep into the politics stuff, but if you get into the right versus left, or media versus mainstream media versus right-wing media, as it is with everything on one side of the spectrum, everything that they accuse their opponent of doing is the thing that they're doing. Yeah. So when you look at the mainstream media and how intricately things are generally researched and fact-checked and multiple sources and all this, and then you look at a similar story that's coming out of a right-leaning institution that is not a credible part, like let's say beyond Fox News, beyond just the edges of the mainstream media, but outside of that sphere, they are doing exactly what they accuse the mainstream media of doing: poorly researched, poorly sourced, often completely fabricated, easily verified as false, with just a little bit of basic journalism. And it's always telling to me when I have a conversation or I see a conversation that someone else has had with someone like that, in how little they actually have ever even bothered to understand about how actual good journalism is supposed to work. Yeah. So, I digress. I thought it was interesting. There's a portion of the movie where they're trying to, they've sort of narrowed down that a lot of this misbehavior, for lack of a better word, is happening within the committee to reelect the president, which is basically the Nixon reelection campaign. He was running for reelection in 1972. And they need to get an employee there to talk to them, to help them understand the financial stuff, because they think that money was given to the campaign and then it was put in a slush fund and then it was used for all these nefarious purposes,
including
like
paying the
burglars who broke in,
at Watergate,
that kind of, and all sorts of other things. So they go to the home, they get a list of the employees, but they don't know who's in what department, and they go to the homes of all the people. And I was wondering why not call them on the phone? I guess because it's harder to turn away someone who's on your doorstep than is on the door. On the phone. I mean, I don't know about that.
And it could be a time and place thing where at that time, not to say the phone was new in the 70s, but showing up on someone's doorstep and looking them in the eye and saying who you are meant more, indicated more sincerity than such and such from the Washington Post. Can you comment?
Yeah, sure. Well, and the other reason is it makes for better movies if it's in person.
Sure.
But there's one person who, she says, you people, you're asking me to tell stories on men I work with and respect, and don't you know anything about loyalty? And they are sort of standing there and they look a little bit mildly shamefaced, but not really. And I was thinking, their loyalty is to the truth of what happened.
Right.
And you never, and obviously this was written by a scriptwriter, you don't see anybody in the newsroom saying, oh, we're going to get this son of a bitch. Like, oh, finally we caught him. And nothing. It's just what happened. We want to know.
Yeah. I mean,
and is every single journalist everywhere that pure of heart? Probably not.
Yeah.
And sometimes there is wow, I always wanted to get this person and now it's actually happening, but it's actually happening. Like,
right.
You didn't make it up, but yeah, I think that a lot of people think that journalists have an axe to grind, or they make things up, or they, they go out of their way to find stuff. And like, no, we're too busy doing our jobs to have an agenda.
Because if nothing else, this movie really sheds light onto that. Again, assuming that you don't come from the particular side of the spectrum that is just going to say, well, that's just made up. Because that's what you say to everything that you will, if it comes from the correct source, you will accept it without question. If it comes from any other source or contradicts what you already believe, you will never accept it no matter the evidence. Yeah. You're going to say, well, they made that up to make themselves look good. When we already know that all of the stuff that's presented here is true, and it all of their reporting and everything they discovered, it all ended up in everything coming to light, including up to Nixon effectively authorizing the burglary. Yeah.
Well, and as it shows in the ticker tapes at the end, all this, all this, I think, was proven in court. Yeah. People pled guilty or were convicted. Yep. It's not the court of public opinion. It's not like, oh, well, the media hounded them. Like, there were grand juries and people said things under oath, and
And I wish that mattered today, because a couple of the charges were for lying to the FBI. And we have recently had people pardoned by the president for lying to the FBI to cover for him. And that's, again, that's who can say what would have happened had Nixon stayed in office? Maybe some of those people would have gotten pardons as well. Who knows? Yeah. But I mean, that's where we are now. We're at the point where it doesn't matter that some of these people undisputably lied to the FBI and lied to Congress and did all these things because they wear the right jersey. So therefore, everything is forgivable.
Well, there were a couple of people. So this only happened because some people who had not gone all the way into this Nixon cult said, this is too much. And they came asking me questions, and I'm going to tell them because somebody needs to know the truth. And so it seemed like, and in some cases they said, oh, I'm a Republican, but this is too much. And in other cases, they didn't talk about their party affiliation. So you don't know, like, were they just like, I need an accounting job and this works? I don't know. I wonder today, it seems like so many more people are firmly on one side or other of the aisle. And there's not a lot of people who are just kind of, I need an accounting job, so I'll work for this political committee. Sure, I don't really have to believe in what they say. So you end up with the people on either side who are fully in the, you're not supposed to say drank the Kool-Aid anymore, but who they have, and not a lot else. And those people are never going to give up their team. And so you can have all the journalists you want searching for something, but people are not going to crack. And it's it's a little disheartening to know that there's nobody who's going to turn over, no one who's going to help you find the misdoing.
Because the problem comes in when you don't have internal consistency within your own beliefs and within your own, commitments to ideas, right? when you don't have when you don't have a commitment to the actual truth, you have a commitment to the truth which serves your side the most. Like the people who turn things over, and even today, if you look at contemporary stuff like the Georgia Secretary of State in most recent election events, again, not to make this too political, but that was a person where that could have gone so differently. But for whatever else negative there might be about Raffensperger or whatever his name was, he stood up and said, no, this is all above board. It's all correct. No, we're not going to find any votes for you. He stood for the country and for truth and for the law and not for a person or a party.
Yeah.
And that's very difficult to find on either side today. That's just a good example of it recently coming up. I don't think anybody is over here thinking that we might be anything other than lefties, but that's just the example that comes to mind. So you hope that there's more of that. There's more, there are more honest people out there. There are more people who put country above party, and above a single person. But it seems much more bleak.
Although in that case, then the bill that was just passed in Georgia, first of all, Raffensperger is getting all kinds of flack from lots of other Republicans. And then now that bill says that power can be taken away from the Secretary of State if other people don't like the outcome of an election. So glad you did it that one time. You'll never get to do it again. I don't pretend to think that one party does all the evil stuff out there.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't know. I would be interested if anyone's listening and you are as far to the right as we are to the left, and you can think of a time when the blue team has done some nasty, nasty shit, please tell us, because I feel like on balance, the scale is not balanced.
How about this? Where, because we can put Clinton and Trump beside each other, right?
Sure.
What we want to do is we don't want to be able to mark off one for one. Cheated on his wife. Yes. Inappropriate. Yes. We don't want, once we stop checking things off one for one, let's then talk about the balance sheet at the end. Who's in the red at the end.
Well, and I mean, cheated on your wife and talks inappropriately, like that's not harmful to the country or to the democracy, really.
Right. And I think that's where the one side differs from the other. Yeah. I mean, it's probably best that we just talk about the movie from here.
We're going to get ourselves in trouble if we haven't already gotten ourselves in trouble. But anyway, so hey, let's talk about the actors in this movie. So we didn't say. So Jason Robards plays Ben Bradley, and playing Bob Woodward is Robert Redford. Playing Carl Bernstein is Dustin Hoffman. And then there's a whole bunch of other character actors.
Yes.
Tons. You don't even realize how many there are until you see it. So, Dave, you said you looked at the credits and F. Murray Abraham is in this?
Yes.
Which I did not remember at all.
Yeah, no, I don't think you get enough of a chance to see him. But I think he's in the first scene. I think you were saying. I think he's in one of the 3 or 4 officers that might be that bust the burglars. I think he's one of them.
The bucket hat, and they looked like they were coming from an undercover thing, like they were at a drug bust in their hippie clothes or something. I don't know what it was, but
well, he even says they're in uniform. Don't you want this other car to go? They're in uniform. Oh, they're getting gas. You guys need to go. So that's for whatever justification we needed why these are plainclothes officers going in here.
Yeah. So, but my favorite, and I was hoping for a better reaction from you when you noticed it, but 1.5 flashbacks from our Gremlins episode. Polly Holliday, who was Mrs. Deagle in that movie, plays a secretary here, and it's a small part. And so if you don't care who Polly Holliday is, it's just whatever. But she's there, and then her boss in this movie is played by Ned Beatty. Well, back when we talked about Gremlins, the one of the characters there, the Billy,
who's the
kid?
Yeah,
but his father. Billy's father. Yeah. I described I described that actor as poor man's Ned Beatty. And when I'd forgotten that Ned Beatty was in this, and I saw that character, and I was like, oh, it's the dad from Gremlins. But no, this is actual Ned Beatty, not poor man's Ned Beatty. It's actual Ned Beatty.
Your thing, my thing is Zach Galligan and what's his name, getting them mixed up.
Yeah.
And your thing is now Ned Beatty and the dad.
It's gonna be now. Yeah.
Yeah. For me too, this was great because there are two of the guys who kind of run the newsroom along with Ben Bradley. They are from 12 Angry Men.
Yes.
Which is
I wondered if you would notice that too.
My all-time favorite movie.
Yeah.
Jack Warden and Martin Balsam.
Yeah.
Two of the better characters in that. Like they're kind of, one of them's kind of the comic relief. Yeah, like it's always, I always love seeing them in a movie that isn't that movie, because that movie, all of the characters in that movie so embody their roles. When I see them, my first thought is, oh, it's the guy from 12 Angry Men.
It's
like
number 4.
It's the character from 12 Angry Men. Like, oh no, wait, it's the actor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those two, not so much, but I think it's Lee J. Cobb who is the final holdout. Like him, that's all I can see when I see. I don't see him in many things, but he's the one.
Yeah.
But the other character actors are Jane Alexander from your other favorite movie, Testament, is the bookkeeper. We will not be talking about Testament on this podcast because I made him watch it already. It's thoroughly depressing. It's about the nuclear holocaust, and it's so sad. It's very good, but it's so sad.
It's just literally a movie where you just watch as this family slowly dies.
Everybody dies. Yeah.
Of radiation poisoning or whatever, because they don't get killed in the initial blast.
Right. And they wait for their father to come home, and he's never going to come home, and other people commit suicide, and it's very sad.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Meredith Baxter.
Yes.
Not yet Bernie.
Not yet Bernie. Yeah. Elise Keaton, but as a brunette, I think.
Yeah.
She's not in it very long, but
no. She plays the one guy's pregnant wife.
Yes,
I think. Yeah.
And the guy is played by. Do you know who?
I mean, I know. I don't. What am I supposed to know him from?
He was the dad on Seventh Heaven.
Oh yeah. Oh no, I don't. Yeah. I knew the name was familiar. I saw his name in the credits.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't.
Yeah,
I was never a Seventh Heaven. What I know about Seventh Heaven is occasionally a commercial came on for Seventh Heaven.
Yeah.
That's all I know about.
They got a lot of kids. I don't think I have probably seen a couple of whole episodes, but I would not say I was a fan.
Yeah.
I still know more about the show than I really care to, but yeah, he was the dad.
Yeah. This movie is full of people who I mainly only know as old people.
Yeah. From
movies in the 80s and 90s. Like Hal Holbrook is in this movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
He plays Deep Throat. And yeah, like I only really know him as like some old guy in whatever, like, The Firm or,
that's right.
That sort of stuff, like there's so many guys like that in where you see him and you're just like, I don't remember that person ever young.
That's what he looked like when he was young.
And like even in this, he's not. It's like when you see a picture of young Tommy Lee Jones, and he still looks 40, but it was taken in like 1968. Yeah, it's like he's like that. Like,
well, you don't really see his full face. He's in shadow for a lot of the time, which is on purpose, I think.
Good,
but
you get a pretty good look at him.
Interesting thing about him. So again, I've read way too much about Watergate. So his character's name is Deep Throat. In real life, it was a big secret for, decades about who he was. Yeah. Because they wouldn't give up their source. And shortly before, and he's now died, but he released his name in like 2005, I think. His name was Mark Felt, and he was, I don't remember what role he had in the White House at the time, but you know, it was nobody that anybody really suspected, or anybody, if you weren't a Washington insider, you wouldn't have known the name. So it was a little bit of a letdown. But in the movie, they say he got his name because he's on Deep Background. So, it's named after the porn movie.
Well, no, I think he's named after the porn.
Yeah.
But I think it's like, that's the wink and the nod. Like we named him after the porn because that's the justification, right? Yeah. Whether or not that there's any truth to that. But yeah, it's just like Deep Background, huh? Yeah. More like Deep Throat. Huh? You know what I'm saying? Huh? Yeah. But yeah, that's always, that's the kind of thing where even before I knew what that was as a movie, I had heard that part of it. And then I was like, oh, they named a movie after that informant.
And you know what? I'm sure there was like a campy porn about, like a porn based on All the President's Men and Deep Throat. There's got to be something. So. Listeners, if you know of that thing, don't send us links. I don't want to see it. I just want to know that it exists because that sounds pretty fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yes,
okay.
Tons of characters.
Lots of innuendo. There.
And
So yeah. So one of my questions in my notes was, does this hold up? Like I said, this is almost 50 years after the first events, and we weren't alive for any of this, and it's. So we are not as aware of all the characters and the events, and movie making is different and screenwriting is different. I think if they made this story today, there would be a lot more explosions or like face-to-face intimidation.
Right. There's one moment in this movie where he is paranoid about someone following him, and he like swings around and nothing's there.
Yeah. There'd be a lot more of that.
A lot more of that.
Yeah.
That would be really hyped up. But you did hit on it for me. When I think about how it holds up, I think about the filmmaking techniques that are used. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, almost every movie, they do the matched cuts for conversations where it's, close up on one person who's talking and facing to the left, reverse shot of the person who they're talking to facing to the right. Mm-hmm. And they go back and forth like that. And even in scenes with lots of people, there's a lot of those insert shots and that sort of stuff. There's a lot of scenes in this movie where there's a wide shot of like 4 or 5 people having a fairly authentic, organic conversation.
Are you talking about like in the newsroom meetings?
Yeah.
When they're all in that room?
Well, that, but also when they're in the Bradley's office a couple of times. Mm-hmm. It's that kind of stuff. There's a decent amount of match cuts in the around the news desk, in the editors or whatever deciding what's going to go in the paper. There's a fair amount of match cuts in that, mm-hmm. Where you get one actor in isolation, the actor they're talking to in isolation, mm-hmm. back and forth. Yeah, I'm specifically talking about the sort of stuff that was much more prevalent in older filmmaking, where you just say like, well, these 4 people are in a room having a conversation. So we're going to lock off a shot, mm-hmm. and they're just going to have a conversation. Like we're playing out a scene in a play.
Yeah. Okay.
And sometimes that can be really bad because it feels like people playing out a scene in a play. But in this movie, I think it was done really well. Because the conversations felt organic. People talked over each other in this sort of David Mamet sort of style. Yeah. And it felt like a real conversation, someone saying something and there being a reaction. So, and I am not a filmmaker. I always aspired to, one of the 4 or 5 careers I wanted. Mm-hmm. That was one of them. Mm-hmm. So I did study some amateur filmmaking and did a little bit of stuff here and there, but never anything for real. But when I look at an old movie, that's the sort of stuff that stands out to me. Like a fight scene in an old movie that's mm-hmm. shot in one way, and then in a modern movie, everything is quick cuts and Jason Bourne. It's that's what stands out for me, that this would be shot very differently. Yeah. If it were a modern movie. And that's really what sort of stood out. I think it stands up fine, even given all those older techniques, mm-hmm. because there's plenty of modern stuff. Again, much like the time span that you and I grew up in, mm-hmm. it was this transitional period in the 70s filmmaking between the more traditional stuff from the 50s and 60s mm-hmm. and the more modern stuff that we see today. That there were some good match cuts. Like there's a scene where Woodward and Bernstein kind of discover each other. And mm-hmm. I was actually in my head, I was calling out the shots. It was, he goes and he puts his, mm-hmm. Woodward goes and puts his paper down. And then you have a shot of him and you see over his shoulder, he sees Bernstein pick it up and go back to his desk. And then you see Woodward he peeks up. It's a shot of behind him. He peeks up over his desk wall. And I said, okay, reverse shot.
You're right.
Then they did a reverse shot of him peeking over the wall. The shot where he peeks over the wall is great because you can see his name tag in the shot, like very specifically in the shot. Yeah. And I was like, reverse shot, and they show a reverse shot, and then shot of Bernstein, reverse shot from Bernstein looking back at Woodward. Yeah. Like I was calling it out beat by beat. And there's something like comforting about that. It's this language of filmmaking that's just like, yes, that's exactly what I expect, that filmmakers sometimes use to subvert your expectations. But mm-hmm. that was this sort of more modern beat. establish shot, reverse, establish, that kind of stuff. So I think there are a lot of aspects of it that do hold up from that standpoint. But that's really that's kind of my thing.
Yeah.
So when I think about does a movie stand up, I often think about how it's shot and how it's paced and how the dialogue flows and stuff like that more than subject matter.
Yeah. Well, I don't mean subject matter necessarily. I just mean
delivery of subject. I mean,
yeah. Well, and I guess the framing of the story. I don't know. I think if you were to tell me write a movie about this, I would want to end on a much more triumphant note, which is somebody's conviction or Nixon's resignation, and so I would have.
Well, yeah, I guess,
changed.
But I mean, really. They pulled the tab, somebody else opened the can.
Sure.
And I think where it ends is appropriate because that's where it ends. They put that story out that got the ball rolling in all of the other places that it needed to roll. And I looked at the last scene as they're sitting there typing, they're writing completely different stories. They've moved on. They're on to the next thing. They're not even watching the inauguration at that point. They're just on to the next thing, dedicated to their work.
Yeah.
Okay, we're through that one. What's next?
Yeah. We're not going to waste time mourning that this guy got reelected. We're going to keep.
Right. We did our part. We did all we could.
Yeah.
We completed the function of the press in a free country.
Yeah. Well, and I think I don't remember. I think it was pretty much a foregone conclusion that he was going to win. So I don't think that ever their intention was, we're going to break this scandal and he won't be reelected because McGovern, I think, was not a great candidate.
Which is always what makes it the weirder thing that they did all this illegal stuff and they were going to win. I mean, some of the stuff that they did was in manipulating the primaries to get McGovern to be the candidate that they were running against. So that stuff maybe. But.
They talk about the Canuck letter, and that's one of those things where, if you don't know, you're like, what? And I only vaguely remember, but they forged a letter and said that it was from Edward Muskie, that he called somebody a Canuck, which makes me laugh because that's not a nice thing to say, but in the universe of things that you could say in 2021, that is just quaint. And there was a big press conference that he gave, and it was snowing, and he was crying, and he's holding up the letter, and I think it came out that he had been diagnosed with depression, and that was enough to kill his campaign, and and would he have been a better candidate? I don't know, but he wasn't.
They clearly didn't want to face him.
Yeah.
I think that's the takeaway.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think there's some pacing stuff you would improve, a movie that I think is really similar to this movie in pacing and in style and in the ending is Zodiac by David Fincher.
I've seen that, but I can't remember anything about it.
It is a slow, plodding movie in which very little happens, and it doesn't end with them catching the Zodiac killer because they didn't. Mm-hmm. It ends at this point where they're like, we're pretty sure it might be this guy, but it kind of is the same sort of ending. And when I say the same, I mean kind of semi unsatisfactory. Mm-hmm. And it's a long movie in which not a lot of action happens. It's a lot of procedures and just police going to places and hoping that someone will say something. And, after watching this, I put those two movies very close together.
Interesting. And I'll have to watch that again and see, because I know I've seen it, but it's been a long time.
And I felt like that was some of the criticism of that movie. Nothing happens in this movie. What's going on in this movie? And, I don't hold it out as one of his better movies. I know a lot of people do, but because I feel the same way, not a lot happens in this movie. Mm-hmm. You are relaying to me true information in the way that it probably actually happened, but I don't care.
Yeah.
You're not making me care about it.
Yeah.
And that's, that's the failing. But yeah, I bet there's a fun script doctor experiment to do with the screenplay and trying to update it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. Final question. And this will lead into, my next one that we're going to watch, 2 episodes from now. What would you say to a movie that had Will Ferrell as Woodward and Bruce McCullough as Bernstein?
I feel like that sounds familiar.
Yes. So yeah, next time that's my movie, we're gonna watch Dick, which has those two cast as that, and it's a little different take on Watergate. But you kind of have to have watched this to get some of the humor of that. It's good on its own, I think, but but yeah, if they did say, okay, for the 50th anniversary of Nixon's resignation, we're redoing the movie, who would you cast as these guys today?
I think, I mean, how appropriate do you want to be as far as, I mean, I think one of the things you have to think about with casting stuff these days is casting appropriate ethnicity and or, whatever in the roles. With a name like Bernstein, I'm assuming Jewish.
Extremely.
Right. Because who I would want to play that role based on Dustin Hoffman having played him would be Mark Ruffalo.
Oh, yeah.
But if you wanted to cast a Jewish actor, then I got to dig a lot deeper for that.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just earlier today, I was watching, I seem to watch a lot of movies about Israeli intelligence agents tracking down Nazis. Like this is the second or third time I've watched one, but this one had Nick Kroll as one of them and in a dramatic role. And I've never really liked him much as a comedian, but he was not bad. So I'm going to put him forward because he definitely fits that.
Was he German?
No, he was American. He wasn't attempting an accent.
One of his ridiculous German accents or something.
And I don't know. Woodward, I always thought, so when I was growing up and we'd see stills from this, my mom was like, Hollywood did both of them a favor in casting them.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
I didn't know what Woodward looked like until I was much older. And then when I saw the real Woodward, I was like, that's not Robert Redford.
Yeah.
Oh, he's fine looking, Woodward is, but Robert Redford is just, But when I imagine Woodward, I imagine Redford's blonde hair, which kind of gives off this halo effect. So in my head, it's Owen Wilson because he's got that halo like blonde, but that's not a good choice at all. That wouldn't work.
Probably not.
That wouldn't work. I don't know. No. I kind of think of Brad Pitt as the heir to the Redford throne, but again, I don't know if that would work. Yeah, he's not quite cerebral enough. I don't think.
Yeah, I think you could. I mean, he's a good actor.
That's in the 21st century version where there's a lot more explosions and a lot more tension.
Right. Yeah.
So
he works much better. Or DiCaprio works in that too. I'd throw him in there.
Or maybe. Maybe he's a little too squirrely, I think.
Is he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, let us know your fantasy casting, people. We're going to make it happen.
One thing I do wish is that, and they do this at the end of some, as our British friends would say, biopics.
What happened to them later?
No, just a still image of the actual people. Or over the credits, they'll often do that.
Yeah.
You put up a picture of the actual Woodward and you say Robert Redford, you put up a picture of the actual Bernstein. That would have been nice. Or like I said, even just because there are several shots in this movie that are very much like from afar in the newsroom of like one of them leaned over the other's desk.
And you're like, that was taken from a real photo.
Yeah, you're like, that's a picture.
Yeah.
Like 100% that's a picture.
Yeah.
Or that's framed like a picture, if nothing else. Yeah, I want that. Like, what are the chances? I don't know that anyone took a picture of these two guys working together on this story in the newsroom.
Once they knew after the events of the end of this, when it was getting serious, I'm sure they did. One more fun fact about Bernstein: after the events of this, he married the writer Nora Ephron.
Okay,
and they had a terrible divorce, which is loosely fictionalized in the book and movie Heartburn. He was basically a real bastard. Cheated on her when she was pregnant and, not good. And so if you enjoy any of Nora Ephron's books or later movies or anything, you can in part maybe thank Carl Bernstein for being a dick, because it might not have happened that way had their marriage not ended. I don't know. Maybe it would have, but Heartburn wouldn't have happened. And that's a pretty good book. It's a book that includes recipes. That's where my mom gets her cheesecake recipe from, is that book.
Wow.
So my mom's cheesecake. Thank you, Carl Bernstein.
Thank you.
It's one of those butterfly effect things. Carl Bernstein is a dick. Nora Ephron writes book. My mom makes cheesecake. The world has changed. There you go.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I think that's our take on All the President's Men. Should people today see it? I think yes.
Oh, 100%. I mean, to whatever degree it's fictionalized or because again, this is taken from a book written by the guys who are the focus of this movie.
Yeah.
So again, it's like, is it as bad as the Queen? Is it Bohemian Rhapsody? Is it as embellished as that and as absolutely fraudulent as that as I'm told that movie is?
Yeah.
Well,
By
a lot of people.
And I'm sure there are many books telling you all the things that their book got wrong.
Yeah.
But they didn't do all this themselves. There were, blah, blah, blah. So if you want the full story, I'm sure it's out there for you to find in bits and pieces.
Yeah. But it's an absolutely interesting look into journalism and how it works, including the fact that some of this only ever happens because there just happen to be people working in the newsroom who also date people who are around the edges of this conspiracy or related in some way, touch it. Work at a place that like 6 degrees of separation
and
kind of thing.
Someone asks for information and
it's such a small world kind of thing. And it gives you kind of a good idea of like, I imagine Washington DC is still like that to this day. It's a very small, especially in that, whatever you Beltway, that
Lord.
area. I bet it's very small. I bet, they all know each other and date each other and yada, yada, yada. But
I would never kind of have a conversation about anything anywhere except my own house. That was even the slightest bit personal because everyone's listening and
that kind of stuff is just, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
And if you're not really familiar with exactly what happened here and why so many people compared our most recent ex-president to Nixon and why there was so much focus put on the corruption and all this stuff, this movie unfolds the playbook that was most recently used. And it's extremely interesting for that too. So I mean, and again, like I said, the stuff that I don't want to say antiquated, but the older school filmmaking techniques, they didn't bother me, but I noticed them. The average person will not, will not care. So man, definitely watch it.
Okay. I'm sorry. I have one final thought about Nixon than about the movie. The reason that Nixon resigned at the end was he said, I realized I don't have any support in Congress.
Yeah.
Part of the reason he didn't have support in Congress is undoubtedly that ordinary citizens, voters, called their representatives and said, this guy has to go. This guy's terrible. So you, listener, if you are living in the U.S., we know not all of you are, but if you live in the U.S. and you're a registered voter and someone is doing something in D.C. that you don't like, call your representatives and tell them. Don't assume that they will vote a certain way because they are on the red team or the blue team.
Yes.
Tell them. Appeal to their better angels and tell them what you want them to do. Yes. Because that's how things happen.
We live in a blue area of a purple state, mostly red these days. And our national representation is largely Republican.
Yeah.
But that doesn't stop you especially, but it shouldn't stop anyone who isn't wearing that jersey from calling and saying, hey, this is a reprehensible thing and you should vote against it.
And I admit, a lot of the times I do say, they're never going to, I know what they're going to do. But it shouldn't matter. Call them anyway.
It's important for you to do your part.
Yes. So
regardless of the outcome.
Democracy is not a spectator sport, as they say. So,
yes.
So that's All the President's Men. We recommend that you check it out if you have not already. And then let us know what you think. Let us know your fantasy casting for the 50th anniversary of this movie. And really seriously, if you can think of, people on the blue team who've done shifty stuff, same as on the red team, tell us that too. Love to hear it. And we would just love to know your thoughts on this and have you read the book? What do you think? You can drop us a line. We're at either Twitter or Gmail. The handle for both is YSMY podcast for You Show Me Yours podcast. Yes. Send us an email. Let us know what you think. And in the meantime, our new I can't talk. Geez. New episodes come out every other Wednesday. And to make sure that you get the next one, you can subscribe to us on most major podcast platforms, including Spotify. Mm-hmm. And it would help us out a lot if you would leave us a rating or a review on the platforms that allow that. I believe Apple Podcasts does. I'm not sure about some of the other ones.
Yeah.
We would love to know that you are listening and enjoying your podcast. And if you're not, write to us and tell us what you think we could improve.
Yes. If you're not listening to this podcast, please write us
if
an
you're
email.
not enjoying, thank you.
Yes.
I don't have a copy editor for when things come right out of my mouth.
We already take it as written that you're cool it on the political stuff. Got it. All right. We don't need emails for shut up lefties about your lefty. Like, got it. It's just this movie brings up certain things. This is not becoming a leftist podcast.
I don't think you could talk about this and not let politics in.
Well, and not compare it to modern day and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yes. It's just smacking you in the face.
Yes.
But anyway, so that's all the President's been. Tune in next time for Dave. Do you know what we're talking about next time? Maybe not.
So I've got one that I really, it's one of those movies that it's a time capsule type movie for me, meaning I haven't watched it in at least 10 years. And I don't know if going back to it, I'm gonna even like it.
Oh boy.
Well, no, I mean, because in my head, I love it.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite movies of all time. But yeah, I don't know. I'm afraid going back to it and it being just horrible.
Oh yeah.
And
that's
cringy.
Risky. Okay. What is it?
The Crow.
Oh,
with Brandon Lee.
Yeah. I know nothing about that. So
yeah,
okay.
I mean, this movie came out right in the time where I was edgy teen.
Yes.
And, was right up my alley. And, I wanted to be Eric Draven. And
it should have been right up my alley. I don't know why I watched it. I was plenty angsty at the time. I don't know.
Yeah. So I'm so afraid that going back to it now, I'm going to be like, oh, this movie's so problematic or whatever. But yeah, we'll see.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. Cross your fingers that Dave likes it, and we'll tell you about it next episode. And then after that, we're watching Dick. We usually don't broadcast them this far ahead, but that's the plan. So
you got it.
So we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye.
Bye. The You Show Me Yours theme song is Uplifting Electronic Indie by Winnie the Moog from filmmusic.io.